So far, I have taught 4 of my kids how to read, and I wanted to share some of the things that I have learned over the past 12 years with reading and things that I wish I had known when I first started out. Reading has changed our perception about what speech or language really is. When we are talking with our mouths, what we are hearing is just sound. For instance, if you ever watched a Spanish soap or a Japanese anime, what you're hearing is just one long string of sounds. It's really hard to separate it out into individual words.
Lève-toi un peu, la lumière tombe là.
Oui, oui, j'arrive. And that is the same thing for a child who is just learning how to read. Prior to that moment, they were just speaking. It was just a sound and not necessarily thinking of individual words or even individual sounds. That is a new concept that you're introducing when you're learning how to read. So the point being that a child hears speech. They don't necessarily hear letters. They don't necessarily hear words. Words have proper spelling and they have proper position within a sentence. That's a lot of new concepts to learn when you are introducing reading. And not only that, reading is a technology where you're literally transcribing sound, things that we say, into physical form, something that can then be set down in a book and then picked up and read and spoken again. I mean, that alone, that thought alone really blows my mind, that the fact that we are recording speech and that somebody else can read it and then say the exact same thing that we just said or wrote down. That is incredible and probably one of the biggest advances of technology that is very, very basic, but has totally transformed humanity. I mean, that's kind of the nerd in me coming out. It's really, really cool. Language at the Speed of Sight by Mark Seidenberg goes deeper into this, and if you are interested in it, I'd highly recommend picking up his book. He is a neuroscientist. It came out fairly recently, I think maybe in 2017, and he goes into what we know about the brain and how it makes neural connections. It is a thick read though. Oh my gosh, my friends. It's taken me several months to read through it. Highly recommend looking into that book if you are pursuing more information about reading. We've all heard that reading out loud to our child is super important. However, I've never had a really good, clear idea of why until I came across this idea that what we're doing is we're recording speech and then reading it later to be spoken out loud, right? And so the reason why it is so important to read is because we speak differently than we transcribe. Whenever you read a book, that is not necessarily how we talk in real life. We have slang, we drop words, we insert so, and it doesn't flow smoothly. It doesn't, speaking of not, flowing smoothly. When you are reading, there's a different pattern structure and there is a different sentence structure than normal speech. And that is why it is so important for children to hear books that are being read out loud to them, because they are now picking up on sentence structure. They're picking up on dialogue, he said, she said, and how a book typically flows. And the reason why that is important is that when they pick up a book themselves and they start reading it, their brain captures those patterns. It remembers how it sounded like when they were read out loud too. And that helps with their comprehension. It helps with their natural flow and fluency as they are reading, and why it is so important to read out loud. I have come across in several of parenting circles that I'm involved in where a child does not read. They cannot read. And their parents have either said, well, we just read to them. We're going to read to them a bunch and it's going to happen. And then you have parents who are like, oh, that child doesn't read very well. Well, their parents must not read to them very well. It is very important that you read to your children out loud and that they are reading with you, that they see you reading. However, it is a fallacy to assume that that is all you need to do. Meaning a child who struggles with reading does not mean that they were not read to, that a parent did not care enough to sit down and work with them on reading. Just reading out loud, although very beneficial, does not mean that they will automatically become excellent readers. Another benefit to reading out loud to your kids is that you are typically reading books that are a little bit above their reading ability. So that frustration level book, if they tried to read it themselves. The reason why you want to read books like that is vocabulary. So we use The Good and the Beautiful in our house, and they have those big long vocabulary lists where you are learning how to say I don't know, vague and Chevrolet, and I don't remember what are some of the other words. Revolutionary, and a lot of French words, actually, I noticed last time I was doing it. And those are great. Those are good because you are learning how to break up syllables with words that you don't necessarily know. However, they aren't quite there. They're not quite enough. And this is my beef with vocabulary lists such as these, is that it doesn't give you the word context. They're not learning a new word. They're learning how to break it up into new syllables, and that is good. It's missing the part of understanding what the word means. And for that, it needs to be put in a sentence where it falls into. Is it a verb? Is it an adverb? Feeling how that word fits within a book, which is why Charlotte Mason encourages young readers to read and do copy work so you can pick those big words out and you learn how to spell them and whatever. Also really good. However, you're missing out on the speech part, which is what the Good and the Beautiful's vocabulary list. So we need to somehow blend these two, thought ideologies together. The best way to pick up vocabulary words is by reading, and I would argue the best way to do that is with audiobooks, because not only are they hearing how it fits in a sentence and the speech pattern, they're also hearing how it is properly pronounced. Benefits are also included if you have them reading along with their book, so they are hearing it and also seeing it, because you're connecting the speech to the words that they're seeing on the page. Let's talk about rhyming and why rhyming is so important, because you hear about this, read Mother Goose, read poetry, and I was like,
why? What's the deal here?
And that brings it back to phonics, because what you're hearing, what your child is learning is individual sounds connected to different ending words. So when you read a poem like Ba Ba Black Sheep, yes sir, 3 bags full. That's a really terrible example. Let's see. Okay, here we go. For instance, like pat a cake, baker's man, bake me a cake as fast as you can. We've got man and can, and those words automatically connect in your brain, and they have a punch to them, and they have a syllable, and they have a beat, and that helps with them pulling apart sounds and blending sounds later on when they are practicing reading. Tongue twisters also have similar effects where they are pulling one particular sound at the very beginning of a sentence and making that brain connection of this has a similar sound and this is how it will flow. Not only that, it is really good for speech in general. So if you are articulate, you are able to do tongue twisters a lot easier, which clearly I am not. These help early readers by benefiting them in isolating those sounds. And not only that, it helps them with their speech. Reading and speech are cyclical, and when you use these kind of rhymes, poetry, tongue twisters, it will help them in their articulation as well as in their reading. The Read Aloud Family by Sarah Mackenzie is brilliant on so many levels, and it offers so many good information and tips about reading, and absolutely worth picking up if you are struggling trying to figure out yourself and your homeschool journey. Something I wish somebody had pointed out to me as I was teaching my child first to read is that humans are very good at picking out contextual clues. And this is a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, we are very good at catching patterns. Our brains are very quick to say, oh, I know what comes next. But on the flip side of that, that also means we also make really good guessers. For an example, if you watch Wheel of Fortune and they have categories, punctuation, contextual clues, right? Categories, they can make very good logical guesses at what the phrase is just based on boxes alone. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the ability to make and pull from contextual clues. However, it will slow a reader down. If they are constantly looking at the picture, referencing other words in the page, and they're trying to pull context clues constantly, it will slow their reading progress significantly. Not only that, it really screws up the meaning if you guess it wrong. If you assume that this word means this, or this is the idea that is trying to be portrayed, and then you're completely lost as the pages go on. Not only that, if your child is constantly referencing pictures in their book, then when those pictures slowly disappear, as they inevitably do as you get up into higher reading levels, they have nothing to grasp for contextual clues. So even though we should rely on patterns and neural connections that our brains are making, We shouldn't rely on those contextual clues so much that is the basis and foundation for our reading skills. Not only that, it takes a significant amount of brain power to fund that sort of reading. And so you can only read for small batches of time because at one point your brain's like, nope, I am too tired for all these guesses. We're going to stop here. And that leads me to my next point. There are so many words just in English language alone that there is no way that you could memorize all of them individually. And that's kind of my hang up with sight words. And I know I'm going to get butchered about this in the comments because sight words does give you the appearance of reading fluently, especially words that are so common. High frequency words like and, the, if, of, whatever. Those words give you the appearance of fluent reading and fast reading. Let me just say, initially, there doesn't seem to be an appearance of anything wrong or unnatural in reading, memorizing words. However, it does limit your ability to read a larger variety of words later on in life because you have been practicing memorizing little individual words. By breaking them down, you open up your ability to read larger, more complex words in the future. I have used Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, and I definitely would recommend watching this for more tips on reading.